Good evening. We welcome you tonight to the Zamok Institute program. We do a program each week focused on current events and biblical subjects, and we have a very special guest with us tonight. That is Rabbi Eliezer Waldman, who is the head of the yeshiva, the Rosh Yeshiva at Kiryat Arba, Hebron, Israel. Rabbi Waldman is a former member of the Knesset and a leader in the what I would call the biblical faith or biblical Zionist movement in the land of Israel. And so, Rabbi Waldman, it's a special honor to have you join us on the program.
Good evening, and my pleasure to be with you, as always.
Right now, this is you couldn't have picked a better time to be here as far as events are concerned, because much attention has been given recently to the proposed IsraelPalestinian Conference scheduled, I believe, a week from today at Annapolis, Maryland. Let me ask you, Rabbi Waldman, what do you see as the danger of this conference to Israel?
I believe that the direction of the policy of the United States of America, expressed especially by the Secretary of State, Ms. Condoleezza Rice, is driving in a very dangerous direction, which means the hope of establishing another terrorist state in the Middle East, but not only that, a terrorist state on the borders of Israel, a terrorist state which will be led by the Hamas terror organization that is receiving its armaments and its direction of action, of murderous attacks. It's receiving its orders from Iran and from the president of Iran and from the Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is also serving Iran. And the United States is doing something which really endangers the entire Western world.
Okay, the next question that I had, even if you didn't care about the fate of Israel one way or the other, what would be the impact of such a state on the United States and our supposed war on terrorism?
I heard you saying supposed war on terrorism. That's what it seems the United States is doing, because Iran is just playing around with the Western world, with the peoples of the world, just doing whatever it wishes in developing atomic energy for the purpose of an atomic bomb and other weaponry of that sort, whereas the Western world is just talking about economic pressures, but not really doing anything that can deter, that can assure the world that this danger will not come to be. But the world may think that it may take another few years, or maybe they won't dare and attack the Western world. But with regards to Israel, these factions of terrorist organizations encouraged and armed by Iran, these organizations are already attacking. They are on our borders. They are sending rockets into Israeli towns and cities and pressuring Israel to yield even more of its homeland, which is really the heart of its homeland in Judea and Samaria, pressuring us to yield to these terrorist organizations is something that is just mind-boggling. And I'm certainly fearing and concerned that Ms. Rice doesn't care about Israeli existence. Doesn't matter what she says, it matters what she does. Certainly, I am dissatisfied, to say the least, with our leaders who are disillusioned, who have become tired. This process has been going on for the last 15 or 16 years, ever since the Oslo agreements, which have brought this terror into Israel, brought Arafat back and his cohorts, and one of the leaders of these terrorist gangs is Abu Mazen, the sort of chairman of the Palestinian entity, or whatever name you'll call it, and he is supposedly to be strengthened by President Bush and Miss Condoleezza Rice, and also by our leaders who are closing their eyes before reality. They are living up in the clouds in some mystical faith which has no basis at all, mystical faith in a peace process that has as its partners the leaders of terrorist organizations. Here just yesterday, one of our people was murdered in a terrorist attack for which the Fatah took responsibility. The Fatah, the organization of Abu Mazen.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that. I know where the young man was killed. You've been through that little town and in that entrance to Kedemim, and I have been also. Just recently, in August, I was visiting Kedemim and was with the mayor, Ms. Daniela Weiss, and we drove through that same area. And I know I felt a little uncomfortable at the time. Now I understand that the people that's taking credit for that are directly related to Mr. Abbas.
Yes, they are his people. They are, so to speak, his electorate, and he has no control at all over anybody.
Right.
And he's just a puppet that's putting on a show. And how can serious intellectual people even have any thought that he can be a head of a state, or that there can be another state in our small homeland, in the center, in Judea and Samaria? There's no sense, there's no logic to that. I'm sorry that President Bush uses the term, the spiritual term of a vision. This is a nightmare. This is not a vision. And strengthening those people who are terrorists, knowing that no peace can come out of these steps. And that's why this so-called conference, which Olmert has been saying lately is not even a conference, it's just a meeting, because he's been under pressure of our people. What are you doing? And also giving legitimacy to terrorist leaders, and expressing the thought, the possibility is a crime. The possibility of the Israelis, of our people, yielding central parts of our homeland given to us by God, and that these areas, they are the security of the Jewish people. Anyone else that will have control of any part of these areas will endanger the whole coastal plain, Tel Aviv, and the airport, the Ben Gurion airport with rockets. Haven't we learned a lesson from Gush Katif, from the Gaza area, where we just pulled out and relinquished, and we were promised that this will bring peace, and what it has brought is something new in the world. Rockets being fired day and night on Israeli towns and cities. Can anyone think of that being done in the center of Israel?
I just read an article today that indicated that Hamas has just been recently equipped with much longer range missiles, and much more of the population of the south is now within that range.
Do you know where those missiles are coming from?
Iran, I presume.
Yes, but how do they get into Gaza?
Egypt, I presume.
Yes, because we pulled our forces out of the border between Gaza and Egypt and Sinai, and Egypt was supposed to be the one who would prevent smuggling in of naively thinking that Egypt would prevent armaments coming into Gaza, and this is what has been done, and this lesson must be learned.
Okay, now, if I look at the situation in this conference, and I would certainly, Mr. Bush and Ms. Rice are intelligent people, and they certainly understand the ramifications of what they're doing. I could understand perhaps that the push to keep the economy robust and the Saudi influence through the petroleum and so on might push them to make a illogical decision to sponsor such a conference and to pressure Israel this way. Still, even given that, I somehow cannot fathom how an Israeli leader or even a bloc of Israeli leaders would concur with that.
I must say, and of course on this program, we always tell the truth, and our leaders have just become tired. They say that. They've been saying that. And losing their faith in the justice of our struggle, and are disengaged from Jewish faith, from Zionist faith. That's the only way one can explain. And of course, this explanation not only does not justify their leadership, but it prosecutes their leadership. And I must say, we pray to God that as quickly as possible this government falls.
Yes.
We must have leaders of faith who understand that the Zionist process is a divine process meant to bring the Jewish people back home and to bring the land of Israel, which was a desolate land, as long as the Jewish people were not there, to bring it back to life and to bring a light of hope to the entire Middle East, a light of hope of human progress and human values. And as I believe with all my heart, as our God said to Abraham in his first words, commanding him to go up to the land of Israel, Lech lecha la'aretz asher areka, and you will be a blessing. I will create a great nation who will bring a blessing to all the peoples of the world. Mind you, I wish the peoples of the world would put their minds to the Bible and the words of God and understand that a blessing of a good life of faith and human rights and human progress, that blessing will only come from the godly mount, as the prophet Isaiah expressed so beautifully, will come from Israel. And anything done to pressure Israel, to yield, to compromise with terror, is preventing this blessing from coming to us and to the world.
People might assume that the world doesn't need a blessing, but I think the facts declare something else. I was talking with Rabbi Waldman a few moments before we started this program, and I asked him the question if he thought that Hamas, the Iranian-sponsored terrorist group, Hamas, would soon take over Judea and Samaria. And let me direct that question because your answer was very interesting to me. What prevents them from taking over today?
The only thing preventing the Hamas terrorist organization from taking over Judea and Samaria and from there firing rockets into Israel, the only thing preventing them is the fact that our army, the Israeli Defense Forces, are in Judea and Samaria. And the Israeli intelligence is at work in Judea and Samaria. That's the only thing preventing them.
Now, do you believe that the will of the so-called will of the Palestinian people as such, because they elected Hamas, that they would actively, a majority of them would actively today continue to choose Hamas to be their representatives?
Certainly, the Palestinian population in Judea and Samaria knows that Abu Mazen is not a leader, doesn't have control of anything, and certainly they would elect Hamas in Judea and Samaria too. And they are interested in disengaging the Jewish people from Israel entirely.
Altogether.
From all the land of Israel. Their leaders are expressing it, even in the preparations for the so-called conference at Annapolis. Abu Allah, the one who heads the committee of Abu Mazen, is having discussions in preparation for the conference, has been saying that the Palestinians will never recognize Israel as a Jewish state.
Mm-hmm.
And their teachings in the schools is full of incitement with the same words and the same style of the Nazis as the Stürmer, the Nazi publication did just before and during the Second World War, during the Holocaust. And the world is just closing its eyes. And our government is closing its eyes. And certainly Abu Mazen doesn't even have to respond to that because no one demands anything from him. And they're going along with him to a mystical peace.
Again, there's an active choice to ignore the reality for sure. There was an editorial in the local paper a week ago, and I've forgotten the gentleman that he was an editorial writer from the New York Times of all places, but he was speaking of Abu Mazen, and he said basically he doesn't control the street a block from his headquarters. So what you're saying is general knowledge. People know that. They refuse to come to grips with it, I guess. Now, a couple of years ago, then Prime Minister Sharon uprooted something like 9,000, I believe, people from the communities called Gush Katif, and tore down those settlements and gave that area to the Palestinians in some sort of hope for peace. Now, the people that lived in those communities, even though they resisted being displaced, they were relatively passive in that resistance. Do you think that the attitude of the people at Kiryat Arba or Kedumim or communities like this has changed as a result of the experience at Gush Katif?
First of all, we have to remember that the vanguard of idealists and ideologically motivated Jews of faith who have built this astonishing reality of 300,000 Jews in Judea and Samaria. This is the backbone, and has been so for 3 generations now in Judea and Samaria. And these people will never relinquish their homes and their lives and their way of life in the hills of Judea and Samaria, especially more so after the tragic events, the crime, the criminal events by an Israeli government which had no legal right and no moral right and no Zionist right of uprooting Jews who came to settle and to build this area of Israel in Gush Katif. And after what was done to them, our people, I'm sure, will never allow that to be done in Judea and Samaria. And I believe that Olmert fears that, our prime minister. That's why he's been saying that the disengagement, so to speak, which is really the crime of uprooting Jews from their homes in their homeland, he's been saying that this will be done by agreement with the people. He's also up in the clouds in this,
You don't
thinking
anticipate
that the people will agree.
You don't anticipate much agreement in that regard. Now, I've been going to Israel, the first time was 1980, so what does that mean? 27 years, a long, long time now. The first time I was ever in Israel, I had an overwhelming sense of, I guess I'll call it faith, maybe the overshadowing presence of God. I'm not sure how to describe it. It was evident that it was there. I know on my return, I was so deeply moved by that I knew that whatever ministry that I might be involved with had to be somehow linked to that. Now, we have over the years now come to identify the source of that as people like yourself and the general settlement movement and even though we were interactive with what I guess people would refer to as secular folks in the tour, this core of faith and belief was evident, and you could sense it, you could feel it. Now, the question is, are we any closer to having leadership in Israel that might reflect that type of faith? I mean, if Christians go to Israel and experience the presence of God, it's to a large degree because of people like yourself, and because you live there, you believe there, and you've honored the name of God there by building and living there, and so it's evident of God's overshadowing blessing and so on. Is it likely that we'll see leadership in Jerusalem that reflects that?
Allow me, please, Ken, to relate to the first words you spoke now about how you felt in Israel 27 years ago and continuously during all your visits. The feeling of being part of a divine project of colossal dimensions. This is our feeling in our everyday life. And these are the feelings that we've imbued in our children, in our grandchildren, in our great-grandchildren, in our students now, for almost 40 years now, since we came to Hebron, since the Six-Day War. But it didn't begin with the Six-Day War. It's been going on now for the last 100 years, ever since the beginning of the Zionist movement, of Jews being aroused to come back home. It's astonishing. It's amazing. The whole world and serious people in the world have been looking at it in amazement. A people who for 2,000 years were dispersed among the nations in the world, were persecuted, were destroyed, and the land of Israel remained desolate for those 2,000 years as the words of God are expressed in the Bible. And here they are aroused to come back home. And the world thought that no more Jewish people, no more land of Israel, and here we've come back, we've been brought back. The ingathering of the exiles, the reality of prophecies coming true before our very eyes. and hundreds of thousands, and we have more than 6 million Jews in Israel today. And all this during a process of difficulties, of wars, of enemies surrounding us, of terror surrounding us. And look what's been established, a modern Jewish state with human rights and human progress in all fields of activity, and becoming stronger with a strong army. And now getting to your question, the idealism of Zionism, in order for it to progress and continue, and we knew this would be so, the ability to continue is only by deepening the roots of Jewish faith and understanding and accepting and being influenced by this divine force that is pushing us forward. And it seems some of our brothers, and some of them are still the leaders of the Jewish state, who are, as I mentioned, I'm using it on purpose, this term, disengaged from Jewish faith and Zionist faith, have become tired. But thank God that people of faith, hundreds of thousands of people of faith, engaged in faith, engaged in Torah study. We see our job now, and this is what we are doing, to continue to educate, to continue to bear children, to continue to build, if necessary, to struggle, to fight. And this is the true leadership of the Jewish people, these people of faith. I'm sure in the near future, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, a leadership of faith will sprout up and will lead the Jewish people forward to bring this blessing to us, to the Middle East, to the entire world.
For those that are watching tonight, especially Christians that are watching, that in America especially, as a pastor, I know we always have a grave concern about our young people and what may be happening to our young people. When I visit in the land of Israel and communities like Kiryat Arba or Kedemim, these communities, they have vibrant young people, and their children and their grandchildren are following in the same
I hope you
pattern.
mean vibrant young people like us.
Yes,
me.
And following in the same pattern of faith. So that's and so I believe because of the vibrant vision that you have, then the children are following in that pattern. I wish I had more time to go on with this conversation. That's all the time we have. We thank you for joining us tonight. Tune in week by week as we look at different subjects of current events and biblical prophecy. Shalom.
Shalom, and God bless you.